My name is Maya, I am 27 years old, and I work as an independent artist in Boston, struggling to get by. One evening, while finishing a commission at my studio, my phone buzzed with a message that froze me in place. It was from my mother. We changed all the locks. You no longer have a home. Let's see how brave you are now. She even ended it with laughter. The words felt like a blow straight to my stomach. My breath caught, and I could barely think. For 2 long days, I faced nothing but betrayal and the frightening reality of being without a home. Then an email arrived from our family lawyer with the subject line, "We have a problem. Call right away." Before I tell you what happened after that, let me know in the comments where you are watching from, and subscribe if you want more stories about fighting back when the world tries to break you. As a child, I was always close to my father. Thomas was the one who taught me nearly everything I know about art and creativity. He would spend hours in his small studio with me, showing me how to mix paints, how to look at the world as an artist does, and, above all, how to express my emotions through my work. Those days were the brightest memories of my childhood. We would paint together, laugh endlessly, and talk about anything that came to mind. He constantly reminded me that I had a rare talent meant to be shared. But everything changed when I was 15. Cancer struck without warning. One month he seemed healthy, the next he was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and within 3 months he was gone. The emptiness he left was crushing, and neither my mother nor I knew how to cope with it. Elaine, my mother, had always been strong. Before his death, she was warm, supportive, and had a quick wit that filled our home with laughter. She loved her work as an elementary school teacher, and together we lived a simple but joyful middle-class life. Losing him, however, changed her completely. She became distant, uneasy, and lost in grief. 2 years later, she met Martin at a school fundraiser. He was a wealthy businessman who owned real estate companies across the state. Outwardly, he was polished, well-mannered, and seemed to truly care about her. For the first time since my father passed, I saw my mother smile again, and I wanted her happiness. Their relationship moved quickly, and within 6 months they were married. Along with Martin came a very different lifestyle. We moved from our small, cozy house into a sprawling mansion in the suburbs. Suddenly, we had staff, expensive cars, and designer clothing. Martin insisted my mother give up teaching, telling her she no longer needed to work. When Nora was born, my half-sister, who was 7 years younger than me, the family dynamic shifted even more. From the beginning, Martin clearly favored her, his biological child, and my mother, perhaps without realizing it, followed his lead. That mansion never felt like home to me. Every hallway reminded me it was Martin's house, not ours. The only corner I could claim as my own was a small room I turned into an art studio, filled with the brushes and canvases my father had left me. As I got older, the gap between Martin's plans for me and my own dreams became impossible to ignore. He dismissed art entirely, calling it a hobby at best and a waste of time at worst. He wanted me to pursue business or law, anything that promised financial stability. My mother, who once cheered me on as an artist, slowly began repeating his arguments. "Maya, maybe Martin is right," she would tell me. "Art is such a hard path. We only want what's best for you." But I knew what was best for me. I knew what made me feel alive. And it wasn't sitting behind a desk working numbers or contracts. It was creating, just as my father had taught me. The arguments grew louder and more frequent. Martin criticized my friends, my clothes, my late nights painting, and especially my choice to major in fine arts in college. My mother rarely defended me. Sometimes she nodded in agreement with him, other times she tried to calm us down, but she never truly stood by me. Later, she would ask in private, "Why can't you be more grateful for everything Martin has given us? He provides this beautiful home and stability, and he really does care about your future." But I could see what she refused to acknowledge, that Martin had slowly made her dependent on him, financially and emotionally. He had cut her off from her old friends and coworkers, taken control of our lives, all while pretending it was for our good. It frightened me. I longed for the mother I had once known, the one who laughed until tears ran down her face, the one who believed in fighting for what mattered, the one who supported my dreams as fiercely as my father had. Occasionally, when Martin traveled for business, glimpses of her old self returned. We would cook together, watch classic films, or talk about my dad. But as soon as Martin came home, she slipped back into the version of herself that seemed to exist only for him, devoted to maintaining the perfect image of their family. By the time I graduated college, I knew I could not stay in that house any longer. For my career and for my sanity, I had to leave. The pressure to be someone I wasn't, the constant tiptoeing around Martin, and the heartache of watching my mother fade before my eyes, it was unbearable. So, despite their objections, I made a choice that permanently altered our relationship. Looking back, it was the first step in a long and painful journey that would eventually bring me to that cruel message and the unexpected events that came after. After graduation, I rented a tiny apartment near Boston's Art District. It was barely 500 square feet, with peeling wallpaper and a stubborn heating system, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I could breathe freely without Martin's judgmental stares or my mother's quiet sighs of disappointment. The rent for my small apartment was high for what I was getting, but the location made up for it. I was only a short walk away from several galleries and studios, and most importantly, from Rowan's art studio, where I had managed to land an entry-level position. The pay was modest, barely enough to cover rent and food, but I was learning from some of the city's most skilled artists. My boss, Adrian, was a well-known sculptor who had taken a chance on me after reviewing my portfolio. "You have raw talent, Maya. With guidance and effort, you could truly make a name for yourself." His faith in me felt like a healing balm after years of having my passion dismissed as a mere pastime. My mother's reaction to my move was exactly what I expected. First came the guilt. "After all we have done for you, this is how you repay us, by abandoning your family." Then the comparisons. "Your cousin Jenna has just been accepted into law school, and here you are wasting your life on finger painting." Finally came the cold resignation laced with disappointment. "Fine, do as you want, but don't come running to us when you can't pay your bills." Martin, however, skipped the subtleties. "This is a mistake you'll regret. The world isn't kind to dreamers. And when you fail, don't expect us to save you." Their words stung deeply, but they only fueled my determination to prove them wrong. I poured myself into work, often pushing through 14-hour days between the studio and my own art. Slowly, my pieces began selling in local shops and small galleries. The earnings weren't large, but they gave me hope. About 6 months after moving out, I remembered something crucial. My father had set up a trust fund for me before he died, using life insurance money and savings. It wasn't a fortune, but it was meant to cover college and eventually help with a down payment for a home. I had been so young when he passed that I nearly forgot about it. The trust was supposed to mature when I turned 25, 2 years earlier. When I asked my mother about it, she was vague. "Oh, that old thing. I think Martin reinvested it for you. It's complicated. We'll talk at Thanksgiving." So, I returned to the mansion for Thanksgiving, hoping for answers. The dinner was heavy, filled with Martin's boasting about his latest business ventures and endless praise for Nora's elementary school achievements. Only when dessert arrived did I carefully raise the subject of the trust. "Mom, about Dad's trust fund. I was hoping to access it now. I'd like to buy a condo instead of renting, and that money would help with the down payment." The silence that followed was suffocating. My mother glanced at Martin, who slowly set his fork down. "That money is gone, Maya," he said flatly. My chest tightened. "What do you mean, gone?" Martin replied with icy calm. "We needed it for investments." My mother jumped in, her voice high and nervous. "For the family, for Nora's future." Shock coursed through me. That was my inheritance from Dad. How could you use it without even telling me? Martin's expression didn't change. "You were a minor when those decisions were made. Your mother had full legal authority to manage the funds. But I haven't been a minor for years, and the trust matured when I turned 25. That money is legally mine." My mother shifted uncomfortably, but stayed firm. "Martin is better with finances than your father ever was. He made the decision, and I supported it completely. It was for the best, Maya." I sat in disbelief. Not only because the money was gone, but because the woman across from me no longer resembled the mother I once knew. She had taken what my father carefully set aside for my future and let Martin consume it without hesitation. "I can't believe you would do this to me," I said as tears welled in my eyes. "Dad wanted that money to secure my future." Martin cut in coldly. "Your father had unrealistic expectations. He only fed your artistic delusions. We're being practical." That was the breaking point. My so-called delusions were what my father cherished most, the very dreams he believed in. Unlike Martin, he saw more to life than wealth and appearances. I left the house that night and refused to speak to them for months. Losing the trust fund meant I had to push even harder just to survive. I picked up freelance graphic design work, taught evening art classes at the community center, and worked weekend shifts at a coffee shop. The dream of owning a home of my own was pushed out of reach. Life became an exhausting cycle of chasing income while clinging to my passion. Some nights, after 3 jobs in a row, I collapsed in my tiny apartment wondering if Martin had been right. Maybe I had been naive. Maybe I should have chosen a safer path. But then I would look at my paintings, pieces created from my heart and soul, and I would hear my father's voice. "Art isn't just what you do, Maya. It's who you are." And that reminder gave me the strength to continue. What I didn't know then was that the greatest betrayal was still ahead, and uncovering the truth about my father's company would ignite a chain of events that changed all of our lives forever. The revelation came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in spring, when I was sitting in a small cafe near my studio, sketching ideas for a new series of paintings. Someone suddenly called my name, and when I looked up, I saw an older gentleman with salt and pepper hair and kind, familiar eyes. "Maya. Maya Ellison. My goodness, you look just like your father." He introduced himself as Nolan Pierce, a former colleague and close friend of my father. They had worked side by side at my dad's graphic design company for more than a decade before my father's illness. "I've been meaning to reach out to you for years," Nolan explained as he slid into the chair across from me. "But after Thomas passed, your mother said the family needed space. And when she married that man," his voice trailed off, and something in his expression made my stomach tighten. "What about Martin?" I asked. Nolan hesitated. "I don't know how to say this, but there's something you should know about your stepfather and your father's company." Over the next hour, he shared a story that left me cold. My father's company, Ellison Designs, had been modestly successful, with a loyal client base and a strong reputation. When my dad became ill, Martin, then only an acquaintance with a background in business, had stepped in, offering to help manage things while my father underwent treatment. "Your father was so grateful," Nolan told me. "He wanted to make sure you and your mother would be provided for if the worst happened." Martin seemed like a blessing at first. But according to Nolan, his help came with ulterior motives. As my father grew weaker, Martin pushed himself into greater control of the business. He convinced my father to sign over more and more shares, supposedly to simplify decision-making during the crisis. By the time my father passed away, Martin held 51% of Ellison Designs. Within 6 months, Nolan said, his voice heavy, he merged it with one of his companies, laid off most of the staff, including me, and stripped it for parts. The Ellison name was gone. I was stunned. "Does my mother know about this?" Nolan shook his head. "I tried speaking to her after the funeral, but she was drowning in grief, and Martin was always nearby, always interfering. Eventually, he made it clear I wasn't welcome." That conversation lit a fire in me. I began investigating, reaching out to former employees, digging through old files I had saved after my father's death, searching public records of business transactions. What I uncovered was even worse than Nolan described. Martin hadn't just taken advantage of my father's illness, he had deliberately deceived him. I found emails showing how Martin presented falsified financial reports, making the company look far weaker than it was to justify his takeover. Former employees shared how Martin cut my father off from trusted partners during his final months. And the most devastating discovery was an early draft of my father's will. It clearly stated the company was to be held in trust for me until I turned 25, with my mother receiving profits in the meantime. Somehow, that will had never been executed. Instead, a new version signed only weeks before his death, when he was heavily medicated, gave everything to my mother, with no mention of me or the company. Fueled by anger and armed with evidence, I made what might have been the biggest mistake of my life. I decided to confront them directly. I arrived at the mansion one evening unannounced, my car trunk filled with documents, my chest pounding with fury. Martin seemed surprised, but kept his usual mask of polite indifference. My mother looked genuinely pleased to see me, which only made what I was about to do more painful. "I know what you did," I began once we were in their lavish living room. "I know how you stole Dad's company, how you took advantage of him when he was sick." Martin's face hardened, but he stayed silent. My mother blinked in confusion. "Maya, what are you saying? Martin helped us through the worst time of our lives." "No, Mom. He used that time to take everything Dad built, everything that should have been ours. Yours and mine." I pulled out the papers, laying them across the coffee table one by one. "Look at this. Look at what he did." As she reluctantly picked up the documents, Martin finally stood. "This is nonsense. You're delusional, Maya. Always living in some fantasy where your father was a saint and I'm the villain. These are your emails, Martin. Your signature on contracts. Your name on the incorporation papers that dissolved Ellison Designs and absorbed it into your company." My mother's face went pale. "Martin, is this true?" For a moment, I thought I had broken through. I thought she might finally see him for who he was. But then Martin placed his hand on her shoulder, and I watched her lean into him as if he were her anchor. "Elaine, your daughter has always resented me," he said smoothly. "She's jealous of what we've built together. Now she's trying to tear us apart with these fabrications." "They're not fabrications," I burst out, my control slipping. "Nolan confirmed everything. So did half a dozen other people who worked with Dad. You exploited him when he was dying, and you've been exploiting Mom ever since." "Nolan Pierce," my mother said sharply. "That man was always jealous of your father's success. And now he's filling your head with lies because he's jealous of Martin too." I could barely believe what I was hearing. "Mom, please. Just look at the evidence. Speak to these people yourself." Martin's voice dropped to a dangerously quiet tone. "If you don't believe me, then you should leave and take these accusations with you. If you keep spreading this slander, I'll have no choice but to take legal action. Legal action against your own stepdaughter." I stared at him in disbelief. "Your stepdaughter?" I repeated, stunned. "You're no daughter of mine," he answered coldly. "And from the way you're behaving, I'm not sure you're much of a daughter to your mother either." I turned to my mother, hoping she would step in, defend me, say something, anything that showed she was still the woman who had raised me. Instead, she rose to her feet and moved beside Martin. "I think it would be best if you left, Maya," she whispered. "You've upset Martin. You've upset me. I don't understand why you're doing this, but it has to stop. Mom, he manipulated you, just like he manipulated Dad. Can't you see that?" I pleaded. Her voice suddenly sharpened. "Enough. Just go. Go back to your little apartment, to your little art projects, and leave us alone." Tears streamed down my face as I left that night, her words echoing in my ears. But I wasn't ready to give up. Over the next few weeks, I gathered more evidence, reached out to more of my father's former colleagues, and even spoke with a lawyer about challenging the will or filing a fraud case against Martin. The lawyer, however, was not hopeful. "Too much time has passed," he explained. "Without your mother's cooperation, proving fraud will be almost impossible. The statute of limitations has already expired on most of these transactions." I was preparing to leave when he asked quietly, "Does your stepfather know you're looking into this?" "Yes," I admitted. I confronted both him and my mother. The lawyer frowned. "Be careful. Men like him, men used to getting their way, can be dangerous when threatened." I should have taken his warning more seriously. 3 days later, I came home from the studio to find my apartment in chaos. The door was intact, but inside everything had been turned upside down. My laptop was gone, along with my external hard drives, the documents I had collected about my father's company, and even my sketchbooks. I called the police, but since there were no signs of forced entry, they suggested it was likely someone I knew. They filed a report, but their tone made it clear they didn't expect recovery. I knew who was behind it. Martin had sent someone to wipe away my evidence, but I couldn't prove it. Desperate, I called my mother. "Someone broke into my apartment, Mom. They took everything, my work, all my documents about Dad's company. It had to be Martin." Her answer froze me. "Maybe this is a sign, Maya. A sign you need to stop this crusade and move on. Martin and I are happy. Nora is thriving. Why can't you let us be?" "Because he stole from us, Mom. From you, from me, from Dad's legacy. Don't call again unless you're ready to apologize," she said before hanging up. That night was my lowest point. I felt completely alone, abandoned by the one person who should have stood by me. I had no evidence left, no allies except a handful of my father's old colleagues, men who were themselves afraid of Martin's influence, and no clear way forward. I was too shaken to stay in my apartment, so I slept in my car. The next morning, drained and heartbroken, I went to the studio, the only place that still felt safe. Adrian saw me and immediately led me into his office. "What happened?" he asked. The words spilled out of me between sobs, everything from the confrontation to the break-in. When I finished, he sat silently for a moment, then said, "You can stay with me and my wife until you find a new place. And I know someone from college who specializes in corporate fraud. He might be able to help." For the first time in days, I felt a small spark of hope. But I didn't know then that things were about to get far worse. Only weeks later, a single text message would bring me to my breaking point while also pushing me toward an unexpected resolution. I had been staying with Adrian and his wife Camille for nearly 3 weeks when the message arrived. I was in their guest room, trying to recreate sketches I'd lost during the break-in, when my phone buzzed. It was from my mother. "We changed all the locks. You don't have a home anymore. Let's see how brave you are now." Haha. I stared at the screen, unable to comprehend that my own mother would send something so cruel. The haha at the end cut deepest, as if my pain amused her. I tried calling her, but the call went straight to voicemail. I tried Martin's number, then the house line, nothing. That text confirmed what I had feared since the confrontation. My mother had chosen Martin completely, even over me. In her eyes, I was now the troublemaker, the ungrateful child who deserved punishment. When I showed the message to Camille, she was outraged. "This is emotional abuse, Maya. No mother should ever treat her child like this." Quietly, I admitted, "I don't think it even sounds like her. I think Martin wrote it." But she allowed it to be sent from her phone. "Either way, it's unacceptable," Camille said firmly. "And you need to remember, you're not homeless. You can stay here as long as you want." Their kindness meant the world, but I still felt like a burden. Adrian and Camille had only a small apartment, and while they never complained, I knew my presence disrupted their routine. With my savings gone and my materials stolen, finding stability felt impossible. The next 2 days passed in a blur of exhaustion and emotions. I cycled between grief, anger, and determination. At the studio, I tried to focus on work, but my mind wandered constantly. I found myself checking my phone again and again, hoping for a message from my mother, an apology, some explanation, but nothing ever came. Then, exactly 48 hours after that cruel text, an email appeared in my inbox. The sender was Victor Hale, our longtime family lawyer who had once managed my father's estate. The subject line was short and ominous, urgent. "We have a problem. Call immediately." At first, I wanted to delete it. Surely this was another trap, another way for Martin to gain information about what I was doing. But curiosity won. I opened the email. "Maya, I need to speak with you as soon as possible about a matter of extreme urgency involving your mother and stepfather. Please call my office or my cell at the number below. This should not be discussed by email." I showed the message to Adrian, who by now had become my unofficial advisor. He frowned. It could be genuine. "Hale has his own practice, doesn't he? Separate from Martin's dealings?" "Yes," I confirmed. Dad trusted him. He handled all our family matters, though that was years ago, before Martin took over. "I think you should call," Adrian said, "but be careful. Don't say where you're staying or what you're planning. Use my phone, not yours, in case they're tracking you." With trembling hands, I dialed Victor's number from Adrian's phone. He answered on the second ring. Victor Hale speaking. Mr. Hale, this is Maya Ellison. I heard him exhale audibly. Maya, thank goodness. I've been trying to reach you for days. I got your email. What's going on? I can't explain everything over the phone, but you need to come to my office as soon as possible. It concerns Martin. He's been arrested. The world tilted. Arrested? For what? Financial fraud, money laundering, and several other charges. The FBI has been investigating him for months. They raided your mother's house yesterday and seized computers, documents, everything. Your mother isn't under arrest, but she's being questioned as either an accomplice or a witness. It's a mess, Maya. I struggled to process his words. But why contact me? What does this have to do with me? There was a pause. 2 reasons. First, some of the evidence that triggered the investigation came from documents very similar to what you were gathering about your father's company. The FBI won't confirm, but I suspect one of the people you spoke to went to them. Possibly Nolan. My thoughts immediately went to Nolan, who had been the most outspoken. And second, Victor continued, your mother asked me to reach out. Despite everything, she needs you now. She's frightened, confused, and I believe she's finally beginning to see the full extent of Martin's deception. My voice hardened. She texted me 2 days ago saying I didn't have a home anymore. She chose him over me again and again. Why should I help her now? That text wasn't from your mother, Victor said quietly. Martin sent it. He had her phone and used it without her knowing. She only found out when the FBI showed her the message history during questioning. She was devastated. Whatever you may think of her decisions, I don't believe she would deliberately hurt you that way. I sank into the nearest chair, trying to take it in. So Martin sent it, but why? Because he knew the investigation was closing in. He was paranoid. He wanted to isolate you from your mother so the two of you wouldn't compare information. That was his pattern, divide and control. He did it to your father, to your mother, and he tried to do it to you. Victor lowered his voice. There's more. The FBI discovered that Martin has been draining your mother's accounts, moving assets offshore. The mansion is mortgaged to the limit, liens cover most of the properties, and your mother's name is tied to many questionable documents. She insists she didn't understand what she was signing, but she could still face charges. The thought horrified me. She could go to jail? It's possible, he admitted. But I'm working to prove she was another victim of Martin's manipulation. The fact that he used her phone to send threatening messages to you helps show his pattern of control. I drew a shaky breath. When can I see her? She's with your aunt in Cambridge. The house is still a crime scene. I can arrange a meeting at my office tomorrow if you're willing. I agreed, though my emotions were in turmoil. After hanging up, I told Adrian and Camille everything. They were stunned. So your investigation actually helped bring him down, Adrian said, shaking his head. Even though my files were stolen, Nolan must have gone to the FBI. Maybe others did too. I can't believe it's all come to this. That night, I barely slept. I couldn't stop thinking about my mother. Was she truly another victim, or had she been more complicit than she admitted? The text message, which had felt like her ultimate betrayal, was now revealed to have come from Martin. And I wondered if there was any way to rebuild something from the ruins of our relationship. By morning, I made a decision. I would meet with my mother and Victor Hale. I would hear what they had to say, but I would guard my heart until I knew where she truly stood, until I understood her role in everything that had happened. What I didn't realize was that this meeting would mark the start of a journey that forced all of us to confront painful truths, make impossible choices, and attempt to find a way forward from the ashes of what used to be our family. Victor Hale's law office was in a stately brick building in downtown Boston. As I climbed the steps, it felt like walking into my own trial, waiting for judgment on crimes I hadn't committed. Adrian had offered to come with me, but I knew this was something I needed to do alone. Victor met me in the lobby. His expression was kind, though heavy with seriousness. She's waiting in my office, he said. But I should warn you, Maya, she's not in good shape. He was right. When I entered, I barely recognized the woman sitting in the leather chair by the window. My mother had always been careful about her appearance, a habit Martin had reinforced with his constant emphasis on perfection. But now she looked as though she had aged 10 years in a matter of weeks. Her hair was unkempt, her clothes rumpled, and deep shadows hung under her eyes. "Maya," she whispered when she saw me. She stood shakily, almost as if to hug me, but stopped when she saw my guarded face. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Hale said you wanted to see me," I replied evenly. We sat across from each other while Victor moved behind his desk. "I can give you two some privacy," he offered. "No," my mother said quickly, shaking her head. "Please stay, Victor. I need a witness, and maybe your help explaining some of the legal details." She turned to me, her hands twisting nervously. "Maya, I don't even know where to begin. There's so much I need to explain, so much I need to apologize for." "The text message would be a good place to start," I said sharply. Tears filled her eyes. "I swear to you, I didn't send that. I didn't even know about it until the FBI showed me. Martin took my phone that day. He said his battery was dead and he needed to make a call. I never imagined he would do something that cruel." I wanted to believe her, but years of disappointment made me hesitate. "And what about everything else? The trust fund that vanished, Dad's company, the break-in at my apartment. Were you blind to all of that too?" She flinched as if I had struck her. "I knew about the trust fund," she admitted softly. "Martin convinced me it was needed for family investments, for Nora's future. I was wrong to agree. I'm sorry, Maya. As for the company, I knew Martin was taking over, but I didn't understand how far it went. Your father trusted him, and I trusted your father's judgment. Dad was dying," I said bluntly. "He was medicated, in pain. He wasn't able to make clear decisions. Martin exploited him." "I see that now," she whispered. "But at the time I was drowning in grief, trying to care for you and manage your father's illness. Martin seemed like a godsend. He took over everything. He made me feel like I could finally breathe." Victor cleared his throat. "If I may, Maya, there is evidence that Martin administered higher doses of pain medication to your father than prescribed, especially before meetings where important documents were signed. The FBI found records confirming this." My stomach turned. "So he deliberately kept Dad sedated to manipulate him?" Victor nodded grimly. "That's what the evidence suggests." My mother gave a strangled sob. "I didn't know. I should have questioned it, but I was broken. Martin always said the right things, always made me feel safe while everything else was collapsing." "And the break-in at my apartment?" I pressed. "I swear I knew nothing," she said firmly, looking me in the eye for the first time. "When you called me, Martin was right there listening. He told me you were exaggerating, that you were paranoid and needed professional help. Part of me wanted to believe you, Maya. But Martin spent years convincing me your artistic temperament made you unstable. I let myself believe him instead." "So you chose him over your own daughter," I said flatly. She bowed her head. "Yes, and there is no excuse for it." Silence fell as I tried to separate truth from lies, figure out where my mother ended and Martin's influence began. "What happens now?" I asked, turning to Victor. "Martin will remain in custody until trial. The evidence is strong, and the prosecution views him as a flight risk because of his offshore accounts. As for your mother," he glanced at her, "we're cooperating fully with investigators. We're building the case that she was another victim of Martin's fraud, not a partner in it." "And Nora?" I asked suddenly, thinking of my half-sister. "She's with me at your aunt's house," my mother said. "She's scared and confused. She keeps asking when Daddy is coming home. I don't know what to tell her." Her voice cracked, and for a moment I felt a pang of sympathy. Nora was only 7, the same age I had been when my parents were still happily married, when life was still safe. "What do you need from me?" I asked, not offering forgiveness, but leaving space to listen. Victor leaned forward. "Legally, your testimony about Martin's handling of your father's company and the trust fund could be crucial, both in the prosecution's case against Martin and in building your mother's defense. But that choice is entirely yours, Maya," Victor said gently. "No one would blame you if you chose to stay away from all of this." My mother looked at me with pleading eyes. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything. I failed you as a mother. I let grief and weakness make me trust the wrong person, let him come between us. If you want nothing to do with me after this, I'll understand. But please know I love you. I have always loved you, even when I was too weak to show it properly. I sat torn. Years of betrayal weighed against the clear evidence that she too had been Martin's victim. I thought about what my father would want me to do. He had always taught me compassion, the importance of understanding that people make mistakes in their pain. But he had also taught me self-respect, the importance of not allowing yourself to be mistreated again and again, and the courage to stand for what is right even when it is difficult. Finally, I made my decision. I'll testify, I said. Not for you, I added, looking at my mother, but for Dad, for what Martin did to him when he was dying and vulnerable, for the company he built, the legacy he intended for me. Relief softened her expression. Thank you, Maya. But I need time, I continued firmly. I can't just erase the last few years. I can't suddenly trust you after everything that happened. She nodded, tears running down her cheeks. I understand. I'll wait. However long it takes. In the weeks that followed, I became deeply involved in the case against Martin. I met with FBI agents, prosecutors, and forensic accountants. I shared everything I knew about my father's company, the trust fund, and Martin's years of manipulation and control. During one meeting, an FBI agent named Lena Ortiz pulled me aside. You should know, she told me, your testimony has been the missing piece. We've tracked Martin's irregularities for years, but we could never establish a clear pattern of fraud. What you provided, along with Nolan Pierce's information and others, gave us the historical context we needed. So Nolan did go to the authorities, I said, not entirely surprised. Lena nodded. After your confrontation with Martin, he feared for your safety. He had seen Martin's ruthlessness firsthand and worried he might try to silence you. He had kept quiet before because of threats Martin made against his family, but your courage inspired him to finally come forward. I felt a storm of emotions, vindication that I had been right about Martin all along, gratitude toward Nolan for his bravery, and a strange peace knowing that my father's story would finally be heard and Martin would face justice. As the case moved forward, more of Martin's crimes came to light. He hadn't only defrauded my father and manipulated my mother, he had carried out a massive scheme of financial misconduct that touched dozens of people and companies. Charges piled up: wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, even evidence tampering tied to the break-in at my apartment. Through it all, I kept a cautious distance from my mother. We spoke regularly now, mostly about the case, but sometimes about more personal matters. She told me she had begun therapy, trying to understand how she had allowed Martin to manipulate her so completely. The therapist calls it coercive control, she explained once. Martin isolated me, made me financially dependent, stripped away my confidence, and cut me off from anyone who might have helped me, including you. Her words rang true. I remembered how, over the years, her circle of friends had vanished until only Martin's business associates and their wives remained. I remembered how she had given up her teaching career, her hobbies, her independence. Her vibrant spirit had been muted, reshaped into what Martin demanded. Understanding that truth did not erase the pain of the past. Trust would need to be rebuilt slowly, step by step. The turning point came at the preliminary hearing. I had been called to testify about my father's company and the suspicious changes to his will. As I entered the courtroom, I saw Martin for the first time since his arrest. He sat at the defense table, immaculately dressed, but stripped of the aura of power he once carried. When his eyes met mine, they narrowed with pure hatred. For a moment, fear gripped me, the same fear I had felt countless times under his gaze. But then I straightened my shoulders and met his stare. I was no longer a child, no longer the grieving teenager who could be manipulated, no longer the young woman bullied into silence. I was my father's daughter, and I would tell the truth. My testimony lasted nearly 2 hours. I spoke clearly, factually, about what I had uncovered, about Nolan's accounts, about the years of deception surrounding Martin's takeover of Ellison Designs. Martin glared at me with cold fury, whispering frantically to his attorney now and then. When I stepped down from the stand, I passed near where my mother was seated. Without meaning to, I reached out and gave my mother's hand a brief squeeze. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something, a small acknowledgement, the first sign of a beginning. Outside the courtroom, Victor approached me with a measured smile. "You did very well in there, Maya. The judge seemed persuaded by your testimony, and the prosecution is optimistic about the trial." "What about my mother?" I asked quickly. "It's looking less likely she'll face charges," he replied. "The prosecution accepts our argument that she was another victim. The evidence of Martin controlling her finances and communications, especially the proof that he impersonated her in messages to you, has been extremely convincing." As he spoke, my mother emerged from the courtroom. She looked drained, yet lighter somehow, as though a heavy burden had finally been lifted from her shoulders. "Maya," she said hesitantly, Would you like to see Nora sometime? She asks about you. She misses her big sister." For a moment, I was startled. I had been so consumed with betrayal, so wrapped up in what Martin and my mother had done, that I had nearly forgotten the little girl at the center of all this. Nora was innocent. She had no part in Martin's crimes or my mother's mistakes. She was just a child caught in the storm, frightened and confused. "Yes," I said softly. "I would like that." It was a small step, but it felt like the first one toward healing. For the first time in years, I sensed we were moving in the right direction. When I visited my Aunt Teresa's house to see my mother and Nora, the atmosphere was awkward at first. Teresa, my mother's older sister, had always been kind to me, though Martin's influence had kept us apart. She greeted me warmly, pulling me into a hug. "It's so good to see you, Maya. It's been far too long." Her modest suburban home was nothing like the grand mansion Martin had demanded. Instead, it felt welcoming, like the homes I remembered from childhood before his presence overshadowed everything. Nora hid behind my mother's legs when I arrived. At 7 years old, she had only faint memories of me. I had barely been a part of her world after leaving the mansion. But children adapt quickly. Within an hour, she was showing me her drawings and telling me about her favorite books. My mother watched us with shining eyes, joy and sadness mingling in her expression. I could see how much it meant to her to have her daughters together, and how much she regretted the years we had lost. Later, when Nora went to help Aunt Teresa with dinner, my mother spoke quietly. "She has your father's creativity. I see it in the way she draws, in the way she solves problems." Martin never noticed that. He was already mapping out her future in business or law, the same way he tried to with you. "She's lucky," I replied. "She's young enough that she may not remember all of this when she grows older." My mother nodded. "The therapist says children are resilient. But she still has nightmares. She doesn't understand why her father is gone, why we left the house, why everything has changed." "What have you told her about Martin?" I asked. "The truth, but in terms she can grasp, that her father broke the rules with money, that he has to face the consequences." I told her it doesn't mean he didn't love her, only that adults sometimes make terrible mistakes. It struck me then that my mother was finally being honest, not just with Nora, but with herself. She was no longer the woman who had stood silently at Martin's side while he stripped away my father's legacy. She was more like the mother I remembered from childhood, clear-eyed and truthful. Over the following weeks, we slowly began rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't easy. Old wounds surfaced, hard conversations had to be faced, but there was also a genuine effort on both sides to heal. 2 months after Martin's arrest, my mother asked if she could visit my new apartment. I had finally managed to find a small but bright one-bedroom close to the studio. It wasn't much, but it was affordable, and more importantly, it was mine. She looked around with genuine curiosity, admiring the artwork on the walls, some my own, others from fellow artists. "You've made a beautiful home, Maya," she said softly. "It reminds me of the little house your father and I had when we first married. We didn't have much, but we were happy." She sat at my small kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "I've been thinking a lot about those days," she admitted. "About who I was before everything changed, before I lost myself. What was it about Martin? Why did I let him change me so completely?" I asked the question that had haunted me for years. What was it about Martin? What made you change so completely for him? She was silent for a long time, her eyes fixed on the steam curling from her cup. It wasn't one thing, she said at last. It was 1,000 little things, so small I barely noticed them. After your father died, I was lost, terrified. I had never been alone before. I went from my parents' home to college, then married your father right after graduation. I didn't know how to be independent, my mother admitted after a long pause, taking a sip of tea. Martin offered security when I felt most vulnerable. He made the decisions, solved the problems. At first, it was a relief. Then it became the norm. I stopped thinking for myself, because it was easier to let him think for me. Each time I gave up a little part of myself, it became easier to give up more the next time. But he was cruel, I said quietly. To me, and I suspect to you as well, behind closed doors. The cruelty came later, she confessed. By then I was already isolated and dependent. It started to seem normal somehow. He would be harsh, then apologetic. Cold, then loving. I never knew which Martin I'd get, so I tried constantly to please him, just to avoid his displeasure. That's textbook emotional abuse, Mom. I know, she whispered. My therapist has helped me understand the patterns, the control, the isolation, the manipulation. But when you're living inside it, Maya, you don't see it clearly. It's like being trapped in a fog where everything is distorted. I thought about that fog, how it had slowly crept into our family, how it had warped all of us. I tried to tell you, I said softly. About what he was doing to Dad's company, about the trust fund, about the kind of man he really was. Her eyes filled with tears. I know you did. And I failed you. I chose him over you again and again. I can't undo that, Maya. I can only tell you how deeply sorry I am, and hope that someday you might forgive me. It was the most direct apology she had ever given me. For the first time, I saw genuine remorse in her eyes. I'm working on it, I said honestly. Forgiveness isn't a moment, it's a process. But I'm trying. She reached across the table and cautiously took my hand. That's more than I deserve. Thank you. In the months that followed, as Martin's trial drew nearer, our family began its slow journey toward healing. Nora started spending weekends with me, which gave my mother time to breathe and allowed me to bond with my little sister. I discovered she had inherited the artistic spark that ran through our family, and I found joy in nurturing it. My mother found part-time work as a teacher's aide, her first step toward regaining independence. The finances were messy, assets frozen, creditors circling, lawsuits looming, but with Victor's guidance, she managed each day as it came. The turning point in our reconciliation came on the anniversary of my father's death. In past years, I had always gone alone to his grave. Martin had called such visits morbid and discouraged my mother from joining me. This time, she called and asked if she could come. We met at the cemetery on a crisp autumn morning, the kind of day my father loved. Standing together before his headstone, we fell silent, each lost in our own memories. He would be so proud of you, Maya, my mother said quietly. Not just for your art, though he always believed in your talent, but for your strength, your integrity, your willingness to stand up for the truth even when it's hard. He would be proud of you too, I said. For finding your way back to yourself. Her eyes widened slightly. You really think so? I know so. Dad always said people can change if they have the courage to face themselves honestly. You've done that. It took time and painful lessons, but you've done it. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I wish he could see us now. See Nora. See the person you've become. He does, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Not in a religious way necessarily, but in the way love lives on through the values we carry, the choices we make. For the first time in years, I felt my father's presence, not as grief, but as strength. And alongside it, something I thought I had lost forever, a fragile connection with my mother, a bridge being rebuilt piece by piece. Martin's trial finally began, and with it came reckoning. The evidence against him was crushing. Along with my testimony and Nolan's, financial experts detailed the intricate web of fraud he had spun. Former employees described his intimidation. Even some of his business partners, eager to distance themselves, turned on him in court. My mother testified too. She looked small but dignified on the stand. She spoke of the ways Martin isolated her, controlled her, and used her signature on documents she didn't understand. She admitted her failings, her willful blindness, but also laid bare the coercion that shaped their life together. Martin glared at her with undisguised hatred, the mask of charm gone at last. When it was his turn, he tried to play the part of the misunderstood businessman, claiming he was the victim of jealous rivals and a vindictive stepdaughter. But under cross-examination, his arrogance cracked. Defensive answers turned into bursts of anger, exposing the man he truly was. The verdict came as no surprise: guilty on all counts. The judge, noting the calculated nature of his crimes and his total lack of remorse, sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison. As marshals led him away, Martin locked eyes with me, his glare promising retribution. But for the first time, that look had no power. Outside, reporters swarmed for statements. My mother and I slipped away, leaving Victor to handle the press. We walked together to a nearby park and sat on a bench, letting the weight of the day settle. "It's really over," she said, sounding both relieved and strangely adrift. "What happens now?" "One day at a time," I told her. "That's all any of us can do." She nodded slowly, then glanced at me. "Maya, I've been thinking. The house will be sold to cover the debts. Teresa has been wonderful, but Nora and I will need a place of our own eventually. I was thinking of finding something small, maybe in Cambridge, near your apartment, if that would be all right with you." It was more than a question about location. She was really asking whether I wanted her in my life, whether our reconciliation was real and lasting. "I think that would be good," I said after a pause. "For all of us." The smile that spread across her face reminded me of the mother I had known as a child, before grief and manipulation had dimmed her light. She was not the same as she had once been, none of us were, but this was a new beginning, a chance to build something different, and perhaps just as meaningful. As we sat together, I reflected on the long and painful journey that had led here. A journey that began with a cruel text message, a message that had seemed like the final betrayal, but had instead become the catalyst for truth, for healing, and for change. 1 year after Martin's conviction, I stood in the center of a small Boston gallery at my very first solo exhibition. The show was called Reconstructions, a collection of paintings that traced the path from betrayal to healing. Each canvas represented a breaking point, and each one also depicted the process of building something new. Adrian, my mentor and friend, had used his connections to help me secure the gallery. That evening, he moved easily through the crowd, introducing me to critics and collectors. Camille was there as well, running the guest book and keeping everything organized. "Your work is powerful," an older gentleman told me, pausing in front of a painting of a house with walls made of shattered glass. "There is so much pain here, but also such strength." "Thank you," I replied. "It's autobiographical in many ways. Art has always been how I process life." As I turned away from him, I noticed them, my mother and Nora, walking in. They had promised to come, but in the chaos of greeting guests, I hadn't seen them arrive. My mother looked elegant in a simple blue dress, a far cry from the designer outfits Martin once insisted she wear. Nora, now 8 years old, bounced beside her, her wide eyes taking in the gallery filled with her sister's paintings. They wove through the crowd until they reached me. "Maya, this is amazing!" Nora exclaimed, hugging me tightly. "Everyone is looking at your paintings." I laughed, hugging her back. "What do you think of them? Do you have a favorite?" She nodded eagerly and pointed toward a canvas on the far wall. It showed 2 female figures of different heights, walking hand in hand toward a sunrise. "That one, it's us, isn't it? You, me, and Mom." "It is," I said, touched that she understood the symbolism. My mother stepped forward then, embracing me with a warmth that had once been second nature and was slowly returning. "I am so proud of you, Maya," she whispered. "Your father would be too." The past year had been one of rebuilding not just relationships, but lives. My mother and Nora had moved into a modest apartment in Cambridge, not far from mine. My mother had returned to teaching full-time, rediscovering the passion that had once defined her. Nora was thriving at school, making friends and developing her artistic gifts. The legal and financial fallout from Martin's crimes had been messy. Most of the assets were seized or sold to repay the people he had defrauded. My mother declared bankruptcy, a humiliating step at first, but also a liberating one. For the first time in decades, she was starting over honestly and independently. As for me, I continued working at Rowan's studio, but recognition for my own work was growing steadily. This exhibition was a milestone, proof that I was no longer just someone's assistant, but an artist in my own right. The paintings sold well, each one a testament to resilience and renewal. Most importantly, the wounds between my mother and me had begun to heal. We both stayed in therapy, and sometimes we went together. We learned to communicate openly, to set boundaries, to respect each other's truths. My bond with Nora deepened too. I saw pieces of myself in her, the sensitivity, the creativity, but she was growing up in a far healthier home than I had after my father's death, with a mother who encouraged her to be herself. Martin remained in prison. His appeals were denied. At first, he tried to contact my mother, alternating between threats, manipulation, and false remorse. But with her therapist and Victor's support, she stood firm, eventually obtaining a no-contact order. For the first time, we were free. He was no longer a presence in our lives, though the damage he had inflicted would always remain a part of our history. The exhibition ended with a small reception for close friends and family. When the last of the public had left, I found myself in a quiet corner with my mother. "I have something for you," she said, reaching into her purse. I found it while we were moving out of the house. She handed me a small, worn leather notebook. My breath caught. I recognized it instantly. It was my father's sketchbook, the one he had carried everywhere during the last years of his life. "I thought Martin had gotten rid of all Dad's things," I whispered, running my fingers over the soft leather. "He tried," my mother admitted. "But I managed to hide a few precious items. This was one of them. I should have given it to you years ago, but Martin wouldn't have allowed it," I finished for her. She nodded sadly. "I'm sorry, Maya. For that and for so many other things." "I know, Mom. And I forgive you." The words came easily this time, no longer forced or uncertain. Forgiveness had become a process built day by day, shaped by actions rather than promises, by consistency and genuine change. I opened the sketchbook and turned the fragile pages. There were landscapes, architectural details, quick portraits in my father's distinctive hand. Near the back, a series of sketches stopped me cold, drawings of me as a teenager at my own desk, deeply focused on my art. Beside one, in his familiar handwriting, were the words, "Maya at 15. Already more talented than her old man. The world will know her name someday." Tears blurred my vision. He never stopped believing in me. "Neither did I," my mother said softly. "Not really. Even at my worst, under Martin's shadow, there was always a part of me that remembered who you were. I just lost access to it for a while." Later that evening, when the reception ended and the gallery emptied, I lingered alone among the paintings. Many pieces had sold, but a few would return with me, permanent reminders of this chapter of my life. I thought about the long, winding journey that had led here. The text message that felt like the final betrayal, but instead became the spark for truth. The lawyer's urgent email that began unraveling Martin's lies. The courage it took for my mother to face her own complicity and begin rebuilding herself. I thought about what home truly means. For years, I had grieved the loss of my childhood home, not just the house, but the safety and belonging it had represented. Now I understood. Home is not a building, but something we create within ourselves and with those we love. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Nora is asleep. I am so proud of you, Maya. Today was proof of your talent and your strength. Love you." I smiled as I typed my reply. "Love you too, Mom. See you tomorrow for lunch." Such a simple exchange. The kind that happens every day between mothers and daughters. Yet for us, it meant everything. It was a reclaiming of what had been lost, the rebuilding of trust that once seemed broken beyond repair. The journey wasn't finished. There would be hard days ahead, old wounds reopening, new challenges to face. But now we would face them together, with honesty, with courage, with a commitment to truth that would not be compromised. That was perhaps the greatest lesson of all. Even after devastating betrayal, healing is possible. Not through sudden transformation or easy forgiveness, but through daily work, acknowledging harm, setting boundaries, choosing courage over comfort, and proving change through consistent effort. As I switched off the gallery lights and stepped into the cool evening air, peace settled over me, the kind I hadn't felt in years. The message that once declared I had no home was just one more of Martin's lies. I had a home, not in a house with locks that could be changed, but in the bonds I had rebuilt, in the truth I had defended, in the authentic self I had reclaimed. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that felt impossible to forgive? How did you find your way through it? I would love to hear your stories in the comments. And if my journey resonates with you, please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more stories of resilience and healing. Remember, sometimes the most painful messages become the beginning of our greatest transformations. Thank you for listening, and may you always find strength in your own reconstructions.